The number 7 player is Fernando Tatis. And of course, I wanted Chris to make the case for, because Chris was all over Tatis last year. Chris, will you be all over him again at number 7?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's possible that coming back from the suspension and the wrist surgery last year, I think he was also coming off shoulder surgery, although that was a little more further removed. It's possible he's just not the same guy, but I think the case is very similar to Ronald Acuna, where we have an established track record of a guy who was very clearly on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He came back from a weird season, different circumstances. Obviously, Ronald Acuna was coming back from a torn ACL. Fernando Tatis coming back from a not imposed, but whatever the term would be, steroid suspension, and also all of the injuries that were at least partially his own fault as well. Don't ride motorcycles. But we know that this guy has been arguably one of the 3 or 4 best hitters in baseball in the very, very recent past. Now it's back to 2021 at this point, but remember, that was 42 home runs and 25 stolen bases with a 282 batting average and a 975 OPS. I don't think anybody should be surprised if he gets back to that mark. And it's another guy where 40-40 is on the table, given the change in rules. So yeah, I think if we're talking about Fernando Tatis as the 1B this time next year, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right.
Are you going to rank Fernando Tatis in your top 5?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yep, he is number 5 for me. Now, I think that there's a tier of 2 with Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt at 2 and 3 in Roto. I think after that, it's like a tier of 4 or 5. So I'm not like way out ahead on Fernando Tatis. I have him with basically the same value in a salary cap draft as Corbin Carroll, Kyle Tucker, and Mookie Betts. But yeah, he's number 5 for me.
Scott, of all the names that we've talked about so far, you might have the most reasons or the biggest case, I guess, to make against Fernando Tatis going at 7th overall.
Yeah, so I would start with Fernando Tatis hit 225 with a 665 OPS in the second half last year. You make the comparison with Ronald Acuna. Well, I mean, it was shoulder surgery, it was wrist surgery, and it was the PED suspension for Tatis. 3 things that individually would cause us to wonder about a player's future power production. When Ronald Acuna with the torn ACL, that's not really going to make you question future power production. And then, lo and behold, Tatis mostly fell short in terms of power output this past year. So I rank him 8th. We're kind of doing this exercise where we're giving kind of the stock answer for why he'll live up to this draft spot and why he won't, as opposed to giving our personal take for what we think is going to happen. I would say I'm not quite as optimistic as Chris that Tatis will, bounce back with a better 2024. I mean, I say bounce back, but he had 25 homers, 29.
Yeah, still pretty good.
First round caliber player either way, I think. But I do have questions. About whether Tatis can get back to being who he was in 2021, which obviously would have, had him and Acuna in a neck and neck battle for best player in fantasy.
Do you know what Ronald Acuna's OPS in 2022 was after July 1st?
Gonna guess it wasn't very good.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah,
friend. 728 OPS for our guy Ronald Acuna. Look, I can obviously see the downsides with Fernando Tatis. I think, and look, the upside for him might not be that much higher than it is for Julio Rodriguez or Bobby Witt. So like the case for him is a little harder to make when there's other guys with that same profile. But I think we've seen the higher upside from him.
Yeah, I think the upside for Tatis is the number 2 player, right? It's like you just can't put anyone's upside on the same level as Acuna for obvious reasons. But you're talking about outside of Acuna, who has the most upside. I would argue Tatis has is among that level with J-Rod and Bobby Witt Jr.